Susuko ako. Susuko ako dahil may sakit na lahat. Ang mga mahal ko, ang dami ng dinaan ng paghihirap.
Malapad yung noo. Malapad yung noo niya. Matibay ang jawline niya. Medium build. At dahil nagtatrabaho siya sa bukid, so very, matipuno at malusog.
Siguro mga 5'2" siya, no? Hindi matangkad. At saka payat. Lalong-lalo na yung nasa makiling, hindi kumakain. Namayat talaga, no?
Well, I can only judge from the photographs that he was dark and had a mustache, I think, and he was short and he looked tough.
Si Miguel Malvar, talagang sakto ron sa nila, pag sinabing matika siya yun.
Some of the Americans speculated that the name Malvar comes from Malabar Coast in India, that there might have been some connection with migrants from India. That's why he's dark.
Deep set ang eyes, malalim ang mata. At typical ng Batanggenyo, pag tumingin, medyo nanlilisik ang mga mata pag tumingin.
May balbas. At saka mukhang singkit, no?
Mukhang Pilipino, mukhang Pinoy.
Kasi ang hilig niya ay ang pagtatanim. May mga taong may hilig sa pagtanim. Yun ang namana ko sa kanya.
All over Batangas and all over Laguna, for instance, madami rin yung mga Pilipino, mga locals, mga Indio, o mga prinsipalya na nakikinabang sa lupa.
Yun ang kinalakihan ni Miguel Malvar, yung agrikultura. At bilang Batanggenyo, yun, mahilig sa kabayo, marami siyang alaga, mga alagang aso. So, malapit siya sa buhay ng magbubukid.
nagmamahalan sila. Kaya ang sinabi nga niya sa kanyang mga anak, mahal ninyo ang inyong ina. Inisip palagi niya si Lola Paula. No?
Kung ang kasama mo sa buhay, ang may bahay mo o ang partner mo, ito ang pinili niyang landas. Kung hindi sang-ayon yung partner mo sa direksyon ng ginagawa mo, mas mahihirapan siya. So part ng heroism ng lolo ko ay ang asawa niya.
At saka, ang sabi ko, pagpunta niya sa bundok, gusto niya sumama sa kanya ang kanyang asawa. Ito ay larawan ng isang taong nagmamahal sa kanyang asawa.
Hindi lang sa dibdiban yung pagpapatakbo ng pamilya mo, saka yung kabuhayan, kundi yun ding paglahok mo sa buhay ng pamayanan. Kaya katulad nung kanyang ama, nanilbihan siya sa local government.
I think because also of his ability to speak well, he was a very good public speaker in Tagalog. Not to mention the fact that he was also mayor for many years of Santo Tomas. That's very important. Because as mayor, he was also in the middle between the friar, the Spanish officials, and the cabezas de barangay and the ordinary people.
Ang participation niya dun sa local politics ay nanggagaling sa success niya dun sa taong bayan.
He was not a Spanish-speaking Antonio Luna type of leader.
Ang local politics noon na inilarawan ni Rizal, ang mga praile talaga may clerical hold at control sa mga iba-ibang munisipyo, iba-ibang municipalities, iba-ibang mga bayan.
Yung mga praile kasi, sa maraming bayan sa kapuluan natin, gusto nila sila nagpapatakbo ng lahat ng bagay.
Yan ang reality na. Yan ang political setup ng time yun. May praile na merong susuportahan na local at ginagawa niya lahat ng gusto niya.
Hindi naman papayag yung mga Batanggenyo Santo Tomas, meron silang independent street. At dahil nga nahalal si Miguel Malvar, bakit yung praile yung masusunod?
Habang tumataas yung mga abuso, ang involvement ng lolo ko tumataas.
Madaling sabihin kasi na yung isang push factor, yun ang nakita nilang pang-aabuso ng praile. Pero maliwanag din kasi na malakas yung sense of duty ni Malvar sa mga kababayan niya.
Kailangan niyang tumakbo para magkaroon ng economic independence, magkaroon ng bawas ng political interference ng praile doon sa bayan. At siya yung may clamor, siya yung binibigyan ng clamor ng tao na tumakbo.
Reluctant revolutionary. Inabuso yung kanyang father na preso. Yun ang talagang nagalit siya. So, yun ang nagudyok sa kanya. Yung kanyang pagkagalit sa maltreatment na kanyang ama.
Yung mga last months of 96, from October to about December, yan yung kumalat at nakuha ng mga Pilipino yung Cavite at na-expand nila sa Batangas. Pagdating ng 1897, nag-concentrate na sila sa South. At nakabawi yung mga Kastila on both the northern forces in Manila ng Katipunan at yung mga mandirigma sa South. Ang rebellion mo, nagkaroon sila ng pagkatalo. That's why nung kinonvene nila yung Tejeros sa Cavite, nandun sila lahat. Doon pa lang makikita mo na hindi united ang mga tao.
All I know is that he was part of the Bonifacio faction, and that but at the same time he was also loyal to Aguinaldo. In other words, I'm sure he knew about the friction between Aguinaldo and Bonifacio, or the two factions, but he managed to to be on good terms with both, because for him, what was important was unity in the face of the enemy.
Yung tunggalian, nung dalawang pangkat sa Cavite, hindi naman binitiwan ni Malvar yung kanyang pangunahing papel bilang politiko-military leader ng Batangas.
It was a very controversial at it ended up na si Bonifacio ay nawala dun sa United pinagkasunduan ng Tejeros. Habang nakikipag-usap sila Aguinaldo kay Paterno, na-capture nila yung isang garrison sa San Pablo, Laguna. Sila nila Pasiano. And held it for 3 days before bumalik yung mga Kastila at house to house yung gera para ma-drive out sila sa San Pablo. Tuloy ang himagsikan para sa kanila.
The various mayors of the towns, they brought in their own people. But these were just mayors and barangay captains with their men. How do you form an army out of them? This is where Malvar was a genius. He managed to actually forge an army out of these different mayors and their armed men.
Maraming contribution si Malvar dun sa Paikibaka, hindi nakakapagtaka na umakyat siya sa chain of command.
Ang pagdating ng mga Amerikano, again, hindi naman pagsalakayan na sabay-sabay lahat. So ang concentration ng force nila sa Maynila and again to the north. Okay? So that's why if you look at the early records and early history, ang battle mo sa north.
The thing about the American intervention is they always try to portray it as something benevolent and friendship. We come as friends. It's just a facade, you know. They just wanted to control the country and to exploit it and to make the Filipinos just a colonized people. When the Americans finally decided to invade southern Luzon, that was in January 1900. Malvar was also lucky that the Americans were busy fighting Aguinaldo and Luna's forces in central Luzon. And then after that, By 1900, they decided to invade southern Luzon, and so Malvar had time to set up his defenses. And so he set up the defense lines in Muntinlupa, in Rizal Province now, and Laguna. But they fell one by one because the American forces, led by General Schwan, were like an armored brigade. All the best horses, they really made a blitzkrieg into southern Tagalog.
Problema kasi ng Pilipino, lumaban tayo sa Amerikano using conventional war na harapan ng ganyan. There was a decision at one point na sinabi, we're going to have to use guerrilla tactics na. Hindi na pwede harapan ng ganyan. Because talagang tactically, hindi ka mananalo.
Malvar had to move his line back, but he always kept the pressure on the Americans. And then when it was clear the Americans were going to push through anyway, he let them in, and then he practiced guerrilla warfare against the Americans who were setting up the garrisons in the poblacion.
Bakit guerrilla warfare? Kasi hindi naman nagsisimula yung Digmaan ng patas yung dalawang kombatan. Buo na yung hukbo ng mga Amerikano. Galing na sila ng Civil War. Galing na sila sa Indian Wars. Kaya nakarating sila rito, ganun nakalaki yung hukbo nila. Tayo, kakapanalo lang natin sa mga Kastila, di pa talaga tayo nakakapag-ipon ng armas, lalo na yung mga kanyon. So, ang tendency, siyempre, kunin mo yung armas ng kalaban. So, kung moderno yung armas ng kalaban, moderno rin yung armas natin, kaya lang kulang.
Dalian nyo! Sundan tayo!
General Bell then came to southern Tagalog, and his mission was to destroy the resistance. And so it was General Bell versus General Malvar.
Ang ginagawa nila ng Philippine-American War, maaaring mag-meet sa battlefield, magwi-withdraw yung mga Pilipino hanggang makaabot ng gubat. Kung hahabol yung Amerikano, argabyado na siya ron dahil mas kabisado natin yung gubat, hanggang makaakit ng bundok.
Mananalig mga kababayan at pagkakait sa sarili at pagkakaisa. Huwag nating pahintulutan na mga sakripisyong inihain at ang mga buhay ng mga ama, anak, mga kapatid, pati na rin ang mga asawa na naibuwis ay mapawalang halaga. Tama yan! Tama! Huwag nating tungisan ang alaala ng mga nauna sa atin sa altar ng pagsakripisyo para sa bansa. Huwag nating pahintulutan Sumpain ang pangalan natin ng mga darating na henerasyon dahilan sa kaawa-awa at kahiya-hiyang tanawin ng bayang nagpaalipin.
Mabuhay! Mabuhay! Mabuhay!
General Bell closed in on Malvar during the reconciliation period, interrogating people in the towns, asking them when was the last time you saw Malvar. So they zeroed in, by asking, and by the way, they use torture. They use torture if necessary to get information.
But from the time war started in 99, in Feb 99, to the time it ended, humaba yan eh. And the Americans were not expecting na ganyang kahaba.
In fact, yung makiling, hati sila ni General Pasiano Rizal. So, habang tumatagal, lumalawig yung bakbakan, Batangas, Laguna, yung buong Southern Tagalog na nga.
But the Philippines has been, was actually a testing ground for counter-guerrilla warfare. That's why there is a lot of truth in the fact that it was the first Vietnam. What they did in Vietnam, they did first in the Philippines, but we didn't even know it. I didn't know it until 1968.
Ang brutal na paraan ng digmaan yun na hindi man ginagawa ng mga kasila. Yung mga Amerikano nanununog ng palayan.
The whole thing we're talking about didn't just occur in southern Tagalog or southern Luzon. It occurred in the Ilocos, in Samar, Leyte, parts of northern Mindanao. We need more research to be done.
And, well, definitely, nung pumutok na yung gulo, kasi hindi ka na makakapagtanim eh. Hindi ka na makakapagtrabaho. Kasi you're always on the run.
They finally figured out where Malvar was.
Pero kung papatayin mo kasi yung taong bayan, naawa si Malvar doon sa mga kababayan niya, kaya hinanap siya nung kapatid niya para nga sabihin na may offer na kung susuko ka, ititigil ito.
Okay, susunugin ko lahat yan. Papatayin ko lahat ng hayop. Hahamletin ko lahat. Wala dito sa Hamlet, papatayin ko kayo lahat. Everyday hindi ka sumusender, may mag-Google Pay, may mapapatay.
So bagamat kaya ni Malvar yung sakripisyo, naawa siya rin sa pamilya ng mga tauhan niya.
Hindi lang ikaw nahihirapan. Yung mga kababayan mo nahihirapan.
To top it all, there was a cholera epidemic that hit that region. It started from Manila and it arrived in April. Now, you see the timing? Why did it surrender in April? And when the cholera hits a town and all the people are concentrated in the population, everybody will get it. it will catch the cholera. So Malvar was hoping that by surrendering, the Americans will open up the towns and let the people go back to the barrios so that the cholera will not, will not spread so much. But it still killed more people than actual warfare, the cholera. So is it remaining in the field to fight for the Inang Bayan, or surrendering so that your own families can lead a normal life instead of, remaining sick and hungry in the poblations? The Americans are very cruel.
Defiance is a good virtue. Defiance. Okay. Sometimes when you do certain things, pag lumalaban ka, or not just when you fight, when you do certain things, may end game. Meron kang pinaglalaban, may end game. Sometimes it could be about principle. Or sometimes it could be the final end game. Ano ba ang pinaglalaban ko? Ngayon, ang prinsipyo mo, kung mag-isa ka lang, okay lang. Ikaw lang manahirapan eh. I can die for my beliefs. I can suffer for my beliefs. But if other people are going to die for my beliefs, if other people are going to suffer for my beliefs, unless they share my beliefs, then it's irrational for them.
Malvar surrendered because of the sufferings of his family and his men. So they just could not continue surviving in the mountains. He was thinking more of the people around him. If he were alone, I'm sure he would have not surrendered. He would have really died there, just fighting. But he had to consider his family.
Pedro Paterno was sending letters to Malvar saying that, let's accept the American deal, that we can have independence gradually. But Malvar was very careful to say, no, that's not the main reason. The main reason was the people were going to die the next year if I didn't surrender now.
So yung pagiging makabayan ni Malvar, hindi lang naman sa digmaan yun eh. So, kung naniniwala tayo sa kasalanan ng Pilipinas, yung teritoryo natin, Benham Rice, lahat yan, hindi natin dapat payagan na kunin ng mga dayuhan.
Malvar is a source of inspiration for trying to become more independent and really independent.
bago siya mamatay, yung nasa kama na siya, tinawag niya lahat ng kanyang anak. Ang kanyang habilin ay mahalin ninyo ang inyong ina. At saka, napaka-importante ng edukasyon.